Are you a busy working father struggling to find time in your schedule for your children? Or what if we looked at it the opposite way? Instead, let's put our children in the calendar first. That way we're prioritizing the most important people in our lives. That's what this video is about. It's about putting it on the calendar. I hope you enjoy it.
Okay, I am Brian LaFauci.
I'm Patrick Marino.
And welcome. This is The Art of Fatherhood. So today we are going to kind of jump into one of the things really important to both Patrick and I in fatherhood, which is scheduling time with our kids.
Yeah, I mean, I know that right now in particular, I'm pretty stressed out in terms of my workload. You know, like I've got like an absolute lot to do. And I'm divorced, so I have limited time with my 8-year-old as it is. So one of the ways I kind of try and handle it is I will try and, for example, like during the week when I have him, I'll try and make sure that I wake up a little earlier, try and get a little work done before I have to start getting him ready for school. Then I'll get him ready for school, and he'll have most of my attention during that time. And then I'll take him to school, and obviously then I get to, that's my time to
that's
work
your
or whatever.
dig-in
exactly.
time.
Yeah. And then the same thing, I'll pick him up from school and then try and make sure that, I at least sit with him or do something with him a little bit before he goes to bed, before we eat. And then, sometimes I'll work after dinner. And then when he goes to bed, I try and work late as well.
Yeah.
So this is not like the best way of doing things, but that's kind of the way I do it. But then I'll have like a meeting at 3:00 in the afternoon, which is like right when I have to pick him up. So then he gets frustrated and, I'm not really paying attention to him during that meeting, and I'm picking him up, and it's pretty awful. I mean, I know that I have a lot of anxiety over that. And like the real funny thing is, like, my father just had like a traditional job.
I was going to bring that up, so I'm glad you brought that up.
My father had a traditional job where he's literally like, I wouldn't see him. Maybe I'd see him in the morning, but usually I didn't because he'd already left.
Yep.
And then he'd come home and it'd be like this big thing when he came home. So I didn't really see him until 6:00 or whatever time it was. I can't remember, but like, around 6:00.
Yep.
And now I am actually with my boy more often, but I'm working. And I always say it's like I'm actively ignoring him.
Right.
And I think he feels it when I'm in the room with him and not with him.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Well, there's been this pattern. The reason why I think this topic is so important, and the reason why we're going to talk about it today and kind of talk about ways as fathers and parents that we can kind of overcome this, is because there has been a massive paradigm shift in the short span of time of 50 years, which sounds like, oh, it's 50 years. It's 2 generations. So from what our grandparents did, right, or let's say what our parents did to, it's starting to get to that point too, from what our parents did to what our kids are doing right now, right? But I have a blended family of 5, and my older ones are in the workforce already, right there, college done, in the workforce. So I can, you can look left 25 years on a timeline. I can look right 25 years on a timeline.
What's that 50? What's the 50? Where is that?
Well, I think don't they say a generation?
I don't know what they say.
I think,
you have to explain it to me. What's 50 mean? What's that mean?
I think, if I'm recalling correctly, like what I'm reading is, a generational shift is about 25 years, because from a 25-year gap, you have the parent, who then transitions to the grandparent around, I know it's later now than it used to be, but around the time when their kids are about 25. So the nuclear family kind of cycles about 25 years, give or take, right?
Sense. Yeah.
So when I look at, my parents were 25 around when they had me. I was in my late 20s when I had my first child, and so that's in essence. So I say 2 generations, right?
Okay.
25 up, 25 down,
Got
whatever. But just think about,
there might have been somebody watching the video who might have had that question. So I'm glad.
That's good, and I might be dead fucking wrong. Let's clear that too. I might be off a little bit on that number. It's the one that sticks in my head, and you can fact check us and post it on the comments if we got that one wrong. But that's kind of how you think about it. So go back from us to our grandparents, right? Yeah. And what you described as your dad and their parents was very typical, and more so, even add one more layer to that, where usually one parent was home.
Right.
Okay. So one parent's home.
Yeah, my mom didn't work while I was school age for the most part. She didn't start working until I was like in high school.
Right.
She was working before she got pregnant with me.
Yeah.
She was a teacher.
Yep.
And she dropped out of the workforce to be a full-time mom.
Yep. Both my parents were in education, which is one of those careers where it was feasible to both be working because it aligns with the schedule of your kid's school, right? So they did both stay working, but they were home at 2:30. Mm-hmm. When I got off the bus, they were there 5 minutes later, and then, the rest happened. So you got that shift where, like you're saying, there weren't a lot of, your time might have been slightly overlapped. And my situation was similar to yours, even though they're both teachers, in that, one of them was almost always in school too.
Right.
So they would go to school. So then there were nights where they weren't home. Or my dad coached high school soccer for years. So for that chunk of time, he wasn't coming home till 7, 8 o'clock. And, so I resonate with that. So then there's this big paradigm shift from a parent usually being home and involved, and then the other parent being out. And in those two generations, we go to co-parenting, which is now the norm, where it wasn't as much the norm before.
Right.
Where time involvement with your kids from a father-mother standpoint is more equalized now. So that whole thing shifts.
Right.
And then you add one more layer into it with what happened with COVID and the workforce becoming so much more remote. And holy shit, like the big dynamic around everything we're doing as parents just in 2 generations has been blown out the window. Right. So everything that has been researched, taught, wrote about, it's completely, in my mind, it's garbage right now.
Right.
Because it doesn't relate to what came before us because of this massive shift.
And I also think it's like I'm unusual as well, because like over my 20 or so years of like really being like a full-time person in the workforce, 25 years or whatever it is, more than that, I guess, like whatever. But over that time, I've primarily worked from home. There's been like full years when I've had like to go into an office as like a regular thing.
Right.
But I've always kind of like had this work from home lifestyle, which is great in that there is some flexibility to do certain things. But there's also like, it's almost like there's no walls or barriers to anything, right? It's like, and there's reasons to appreciate that. Like if I just have some free time, I can just work during that time. And if I need to decompress during like what would be a normal work hour, I can take that time to decompress. I mean, there is certainly advantages to it, but at the same time, there's no boundaries at all whatsoever. So I could be working or I could be free 7 days a week. It could be anything. And there's, like I said, I mean, I enjoy that, but then there's these challenges, right? And part of it is how it affects my relationship with my children.
Well, we went into the entrepreneurial world. You and I, we've talked about this many times. One of our whys was for freedom of our schedule, to control our schedule, to put our family first. That was a big why for you and I. But I think with a lot of our listeners, they might not have that. Maybe, some do, or maybe they didn't, because maybe they did have, 90-something% of the workforce is employed, not the employer, right? So maybe they didn't have that sort of flexibility. And then with the remote work thing that happened just out of the clear blue, now everyone's doing it and we stuck with it and it's commonplace now. Now they have what I would talk about before is kind of an entrepreneurial lifestyle, like, hey, you got to be able to turn off. Before, they would turn them off because they'd be like, all right, work day ends, go home. Right. We're only paying you for 40 hours, don't work. I understand some jobs, they push that limit. But at the end of the day, it's always been easier to turn off as a traditional employee as opposed to an entrepreneur. But now the traditional workforce has that same problem.
Right. And there's also there are certain types of industries, like if you own if you own like a store,
Yep.
like you don't live my lifestyle because you have to be in the store during the store hours,
Right.
So that's a little different, right?
But that's a decision.
Run a restaurant, right?
That's
No, absolutely, yeah.
That's an entrepreneurial decision, knowing that, okay, they wouldn't say probably what we just said. Like, we chose, some of our career path was chosen by a career that we could impact people, right, and help people, because obviously we both have that as something we really want to do, but also have some flexibility in the time we did that, so we could. But even with that being said, you bring up the point that we struggle, and the feeling of guilt is there with when sometimes I'm in the car with my kids, and people will schedule these meetings, and I'll be like, well, I'm just letting you know ahead of time. That time is blocked off on my calendar. Like, I'm picking up my kids, and that's what I'm doing. So I'll be on that call, but I'll be in my car, and you might not, I might not have my video on, and I'll listen, and I'll participate if I'll pay attention. But that's when I'm first. But even though I've given the disclaimer of this is how I'm joining that call, I feel that same guilt.
Right.
Yeah, I feel and I know sometimes my kids will stare at me for 5 minutes, like, I really want to tell you something right now.
Right.
The comment, there's a saying that has now become common where the kids will look at me and be like, "Are you on mute?" Like, that's like, can I talk to you right now? Like, can I say something without interrupting this work? And it's this dynamic. It's there.
My kid doesn't really understand that yet, I don't think.
He
My
will.
kid's a little younger.
He will.
So it's like, he just, for the most part, he's amazing. It doesn't happen very often. It's like once every other week, and sometimes it's not once every other week. But like a couple weeks ago, it happened, like where I was like picking him up at the exact time, like I had to participate in one of these calls.
Yep.
Where I'm in the phone and my camera's off, but I had to participate, and he got really frustrated.
Yeah. Yeah, it's tough.
Yeah,
it's a tough battle, and so as fathers out there, one of the ways that we want to impose on you,
parents, fathers, mothers,
parents,
working parents.
Absolutely. So there's a lot of ways to kind of deal with this and address it. And one of the key ways that we like to,
one of the ways that would probably be traditional would be the way that I do it, which is, I know I set as many things as I can, right? My meetings, my work schedule, if I've got a work trip, which I don't do very often, but if I have one, right? And then I try and, the rest of the time I try and carve out for the boy.
So,
right?
Yeah. So what do we do? And what is the trap that I fell in forever? And Patrick, you talk about what we do is we always get, if you want to feel like a real jerk, go into your calendar and just scan through the next month and look at the people that you have said, I will give you my time on that calendar. I will block off an hour for you and a block off an hour for you and lunch with you and coffee with you. And now fast forward to however many years you have on this great earth, and you're at your funeral, right? Well, you're not at your funeral. You're looking down at your funeral. And how many of those people would be there? And that to me was the realization. Like, these people.
I mean, when you died and
when you
went
die,
to your funeral and you
when
were
you
like,
die,
oh my God, I don't know
those
any of these
people that I blocked off so much of my life for, how many of them would go? And that usually you'll find that, or how many of them are going to be at your Christmas dinner table,
right?
Or, so what we do is we schedule first the people and things that, yes, we have to do it because it makes money, and then we take our kids and we put them right to the back, right? We're like, all right, you get what's left over.
Right.
Yeah. And I don't think we do it. I'm not saying we do that consciously, but that's 100% what I did for years. I was like, okay, I got to do this with my career, and I got to do this, and I got to meet with that guy and do this. And then guess what you get? You get what's left over, and good for you. And now with all these shifts we just talked about, well, if we're talking two parents that are equally parenting now, which is commonplace, there's no, mom's no longer the primary caregiver that happened for so long.
Or in my case, which is very common too.
Yeah.
In your case, a little bit is that sometimes.
Well, we both went through a divorce.
And the mom has the kids.
Yeah.
And then I have the kids. So it literally is co-parents, like separate co-parenting. It's together, like we make decisions together, but like I'm parenting during my time and she's parenting during her time.
Yep.
Because it's separated by actual days of the week.
Absolutely. But even with that, Your son's in sports, right? Your son has things. So even on days when they're not with you, there are things that you're a part of, right? You're still making yourself available. You're still going. You're still being there for them, right? You're still communicating with them. You're still making them that priority. So, but puts even a little more focus on when they are with you, you want to impact as much as you can the things that are important to you and nurture them and grow them.
You want to actually be a parent, you mean?
You want to actually be a parent.
Parent, the verb. I'm going to parent.
I'm going to do adulting right now, parenting. So, we want to do that.
Right.
We want to impact that. And doing the calendar exercise is a great way to say, like, okay, am I doing, the word I like to use is reactive parenting, or am I being proactive, right? So to me, proactive parenting is, am I putting what I'm going to do over the next month, am I putting my kids first there?
Right.
Like and I went through this shift where it was consciously, I said, all right, I'm going to TV timeout. Starting the next month, I'm going to block out all the things that I want to make sure that I block out with my kids. And some of it's very unstructured.
Right.
Right. So it doesn't, yes, do we put their soccer games on there? Do we put like their whatever, all that? Yes. But I always say, you got to go a step further with that. And to really be proactive parenting and really to have time to just impact your kids in the way you want, you got to block out just the unstructured time too. Like, I am just going to not have anything else to do during this time frame for whatever my kid might come up to me to do, or vice versa. I may say, hey, let's go play some bat. Doesn't matter. It's just, it's there. And I don't allow other stuff into my calendar during that time as much as possible. Are there exceptions to the rule? Absolutely. There are some times I'm like, okay. And I make that decision. The beauty of...
Well, you're making the decision after the fact,
yes.
Right? So it's like you've done the opposite of what I described, right? You've blocked off time in your calendar for your kids. And then if something comes up that you feel is important enough to take some of that time, or... again, maybe the kids are busy, right? They're playing video games or they're doing something else. They're going to a friend's house. I mean, there's a million things. But it's almost like if I had a meeting scheduled with somebody who I was working with.
Right.
And I decided I didn't want to take that meeting. Something else came up. I replace it. So you're taking that approach. Instead of having the work thing come first, your kid thing is in the calendar. And then you have exceptions to that.
Yeah, I think that's how people schedule. So if you and I are going to get together, you're going to call me and say, hey, check your calendar. So when I bring my calendar up, there's not this specific, sometimes it might be my son's got a basketball game, or my daughter's got a soccer game, or whatever it is, or my kids have CCD that night, whatever. Right. But there's also these blocks that are in there that don't say any of that.
Right.
All they just say is kid time.
Right.
And so if you told me X time on this day and I looked at it, I'd say no.
Right.
Right. And yes, every once in a while. So, it's the unstructured time of a lot of that time I try to pre-plan like a normal dinner time, because it's very easy to get pulled away from that, and kids' schedules will pull you away from that. Right.
Yeah.
The sports stuff and all that stuff will pull you away. So, but the time's there, and it's just the trigger in my head to say, you know what? I'm not going to take that. I'm going to, some days during that time, I am sitting there at my house and my kids are doing their own thing, and we are not having this monumental interaction.
So you can take out the laptop or make a phone call.
I can maybe take out the laptop. I try to minimize how much I do it. What I'll do sometimes is I'll be like, all right, let's, why don't you throw your homework down on the dining room table? And if they're doing that, yeah, maybe I'll sit next to them and tape out my laptop, and now I'm there, and we're working together, and we're doing something. But sometimes I might just be sitting there and just watching TV, but in that moment, my kid can come up to me and say, "Do you want to go shoot hoops?" Whereas if I was engaged, he would look at me and be like, "Oh, you're working," and he wouldn't, he would not take that time to do that. Right. He would see, like, 'cause our kids know, right? They've seen us working from home.
Or he would do what my kid has done recently, which is you're always working.
Which is the dagger to the heart. Which is just like,
and then the reality is, I'm not really always working. There are fathers who are always working.
Yeah.
But because I have this flexible schedule, I feel I can always kind of have my laptop
Yeah.
open, and I'm not putting in like a focused 4 hours of work. Sometimes I'm putting in like an hour here, and I'll be like, you know what, like I can take time right now and do this, you know what I
Right.
mean, or whatever
Right.
it is, get back to this person or whatever. But that's not how he sees it. He
Yeah.
sees it as me always working.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And maybe like, you know, we talk about up leveling what we're doing. So we need to listen to what our kids are saying.
Right.
And kind of be
So you're
like,
trying to say maybe he's right?
I'm saying perception is reality.
Oh, perception is
So-
reality for sure, especially for a young person.
Right. So if I keep that laptop open and I'm just sitting near it, I mean, the brain makes its. You know, you walk into a room, you make all your. If someone walked into this room right now, they would say, "Oh, you're filming," right?
Right.
If all of this stuff was off and you and I were just shooting the shit, they would say, "Oh, you're filming,"
Right.
Right. So maybe part of it is just that conscious next step of, all right, do I need to like just put this away so I don't get in the trap too?
Right.
And do that stuff. And I think, you know, for us, to our listeners who are also kind of struggling with, or maybe not even struggling, but just want to be,
Or maybe they don't realize they're
yeah,
struggling.
don't realize they're
Right.
doing this.
Yeah.
Or want to kind of engage in a little more conscious parenting, right?
Yeah.
And being proactive. Like the great way to do it, and we have a blunt force fact for you today on this, which is great because we love our blunt force facts. But our blunt force fact for today, for you, is get it on the calendar, right? Put the things and people that are most important to you on the calendar first, and then let the world work around that rather than letting the world dictate the time and effort you're going to spend into the thing that I'm sure if I asked you would be the most important thing in your life.
Fantastic. I have to definitely improve on that.
We all got to improve. I fail at it all the time. I fail at the things that I've written about in my book
Right.
on a weekly basis, and I actually have to go back and revisit it and be like, I'm not doing that well, you know, and put in my backstops to make sure it happens, and have conversations like this, because the conversation is as helpful to you and I as it is to our audience.
Right.
It's a refresher.
But it's also like we'll talk about during our business building conversations is we have to take a step back every once in a while.
Yeah.
Right. And evaluate how we're doing. Right. So it's like we'll take a step back and evaluate our business finances or how our employees are doing or whatever that is, or having a review. But we have to do that and you do that as yourself as a business owner, right? Like, how am I doing as a business owner? But it's also like, how am I doing as a parent? Right. So that's what we're doing right now.
Absolutely.
Well, maybe I'm doing it more than you are.
No,
But-
trust
But
me.
yeah, definitely like taking a step back and saying like, how am I doing as a parent? Like, and am I giving my child the right time? And this will be a takeaway I take away. Because I'm not like a big calendar. You're the big calendar guy.
I am
not
a
as
big
big of
calendar guy.
guy.
Well,
but,
I will
have to do a
convert
better
you.
job of just basically blocking off some time and then being mindful during that time as well.
Yeah.
And not being distracted guy whose clients are contacting him during that time.
It's tough. Sometimes you got to hit the do not disturb button because it's so, we're as addicted to our devices as we accuse our kids of being.
For sure.
That's bottom line. Business and life mimic each other. The advice we give in Blunt Force Business is the advice we will give here, with our fatherhood series, because the actions are the same.
Yeah.
Actions for improvement are the exact same. So Blunt Force Fact today, get it on the calendar. You can get more information like this in my book, Paint by Numbers, The Art of Fatherhood. I'm Brian LaFauci.
I'm Patrick Marino.
Thanks for joining us.
Thank you. Well, if you made it this far, you must have liked it a little bit, so please like the video, leave us a comment, we love to hear feedback, and subscribe to our channel so that you can get the blunt force facts about fatherhood and business ownership as we strive to be better this year. Thank you.